What style do you play naturally? I categorize them into 3 different groups: power, control, and speed. You have strong hits, you're aggressive, your mere presence on the court is intimidating. You pressure your opponent through strong hits while moving forward, and usually you get your points mainly off smashes. Are you a control player? This usually means that they like to move their opponents around, they specialize in birdie placement, and always setting up for the next shot. They're not necessarily fast or strong, but they're very consistent and efficient in their footwork and birdie placement, almost to the point where they seem lazy on the court.
That's my style. I'm just not into putting effort into stuff.
They put pressure on the opponent through the placement of the shuttle and win points mainly by the opponents making the mistake. Usually, shots that they naturally prefer are drops, clears, and nets. Are you a speed player? This means you have fast shots, fast movement, and fast recovery. You don't necessarily have good footwork, but you're just fast.
I am speed.
You put pressure on your opponent through constantly returning shots over. Maybe not with the greatest quality, but they just keep coming back over.
Stop it.
This is frustrating to play and forces the opponents to make a mistake due to the long rally or their lack of stamina. This means if you're a speed player, you must have a lot of stamina. Shots they naturally like to play are drives, flat smashes, and fast drops. Remember that these are just the basic outlines of the styles. This doesn't mean that you're stuck in one and that you don't have any aspects of the other styles. In order to simplify the next part, we're going to think of your skill set as skill points. The 3 categories are what we just talked about: power, control, and speed. One of these can go up by 1 point for your natural style and 1 point for what you want from the racket. A racket can emphasize your play style, adding another point to that skill set. Or a racket can add another aspect to your game, adding another point to a different skill set. For example, if you're a power player and you want to add an additional point to that power skill set, then you can have a 3U racket, head heavy, that has a stiff shaft. On the other hand, if you're a power player that wants to add a speed skill set point, then you can have a 5U racket with a stiff shaft that is head light. Every style has its give and take. A power player can have a strong smash, but because of that strong smash, they have a hard time recovering. A power player can be good at smashes and bad at drives. That means that if your opponent is good at drives, they're going to exploit that weakness. There's no point in being strong or adding to your power points if you can't smash in the first place. This is where a racket can come in to support that weakness, not necessarily make up for it. A racket you should think of as a supporting item and not the main thing that you should be basing everything on. You should work first on your technique and the basics of badminton before thinking just about the racket. You have to have an honest assessment about yourself. Are you a beginner, intermediate, expert, or pro? Once you get to the intermediate level, then you can start looking at different rackets. But if you were just a beginner, then I would just pick out a racket from a reputable source, then just use that racket until you can find your own style. Buying a cheaper racket from the start is usually more beneficial than buying a very expensive racket. Pricing. Now don't fall for the marketing that you have to buy the most expensive racket with all the new technologies. Yes, expensive rackets might have better quality, but that doesn't mean that you're going to play better. The most ideal situation is if you can go into the shop and hold the racket yourself. Rackets with similar specs may swing differently in your hand. If you can't go to a shop, the best thing to do is to choose a racket with similar specs to a racket that you already have. Unless you want to completely try a different racket, then you could choose the opposite of what you have. This way you can experience the full spectrum of all the different kind of rackets. If you didn't understand what 3U and 5U were earlier, and don't know what brands to use, you can watch this video